Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's going to be reviewing Barn by Neil Young and Crazy Horse. And as you can tell from the thumbnail and the title, the question is, can Neil Young win me back? Well, it's important to know this is a positive channel. So if I'm reviewing something, it means I like it. So of course he has won me back. This is a very good Neil Young album. It could even be a great Neil Young album, as I will explain soon. I don't know how good his albums are until well after they've come out. Definitely it's helped by Crazy Horse, and in particular the back half of this album I would put up with any 20 to 30 minute section in the entire history of Neil Young's recording career. But what about this idea? What do I mean? Can Neil Young win me back? I should say that he is probably, for most of my life, my greatest musical hero. When I was in high school and all the way through college, he was it. He was number one. I was a super fan. Before the internet, I was tracking down copies of Reactor and On the Beach, which couldn't be found on CD. That was the only reason I'd ever go into a used record store. I was finding all of the, I bought the import edition of Trans, which could only be found from Japan on CD, and I bought it for $30, which was a lot of money back in the mid-90s. You know, I was that kind of guy. You know, everything that he did, I loved. I was that Neil Young super fan. And the thing was, what made him so great to me was that his music in the 90s was just as good as his music in the 70s. It's just as good as his music as it was in the 80s. Unlike the rest of my rock and roll heroes, Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones, his music never got worse. It just didn't. I'm going to be doing a top 10 favorite Neil Young albums of all time at the end of this video. Just for fun, why not? End of the year, I'm in a listy mode. And I think you'll see that that holds up. I'm not just going to give a bunch of albums from the 60s and 70s and say they are his best. But he lost me. How did Neil Young lose me? How can he win me back? Well, a couple things happened. One, you kind of grow out of things, and I think my adulation for Neil Young maybe was a bit exaggerated. I was maybe projecting something onto him. And some of his music towards the end of the 90s, I think, was probably not quite as strong. I think when Bush got into office, his sort of heavy-handed political stuff really amped up, and I don't like his heavy-handed political stuff that much. I don't mind that he's not always a great lyricist, that sometimes he's kind of a goofy lyricist, but it got really, really pretty far. He released this book, this autobiography, and I had to stop listening to it because he comes across as such an old blowhard, just like a me, I'm a great guy. And it kind of disrupted my image of him, my idealized image of him as being more than just a self-indulgent rock star. I married a scientist, and his whole thing about anti-GMOs and anti-Monsanto, I sort of get it, except if you're against GMOs, you are for a couple billion poor people starving to death. So, that kind of like hippie dream, idealistic, faux, rural, gentleman farmer, hippie BS just ended up really wearing at me. Things which I forgave when I was younger all of a sudden started to bother me. And then when the Trump era started, I just was like, I don't want to hear anything he releases in the Trump era, because I just can't imagine what kind of half-hearted, latte liberal garbage he's going to pour out. But this is the whole issue here. He didn't really change. It was me. He doesn't need to win me back. I have to let him back into my heart. He's always been preachy. He's always been overly political. He's always been a faux farmer, rural guy. And I need to reintroduce his new music into my life. Part of the reason that I have this belief in new music and in my belief in the artist comes from Neil Young. My love of Kanye and Daft Punk as artists who are capable of breaking the mold by never allowing themselves to stay in one mode comes initially from my love of Neil Young, who was so radical that he got sued by his own record company. Okay? That is Neil Young. He's not some hippie guy who just sat and got old and kept doing the same old things. He constantly innovated while also constantly saying the same and making similar albums and different albums and doing it all together. He is the epitome of an artist who can stay young and who uses his artistic vision to maintain relevance decade after decade after decade. There's this other problem which I already hinted at. All of my favorite albums of Neil Young take me years to appreciate. Broken Arrow, which is one of the albums that will be on my top 10 Neil Young albums of all time, it came out. I listened to it. I thought it was fine. I saw him perform it in concert with Soundgarden opening up. Blind Melon opened up too, but they played before the gates opened. I was very annoyed. I wanted to see them again. And I wasn't that into the album. About 6 months later, I was listening to it. I'm like, oh my God, this is some of his best music. How did I miss this? That makes the format of this channel a little bit problematic, because how am I going to talk about a Neil Young album if I don't have that time to sit with it? When Colorado came out, I don't know, a year ago, his most recent album, I just heard some song about like Mother Earth and we have to protect her, and I saw that it was a lot about Daryl Hannah, and I have a hard time forgiving him for divorcing Peggy because I'm an idiot and I think I know him and I think I know his marriage. And much like I did with Will Arnett and Amy Poehler, I projected a lot of my beliefs in love on this celebrity couple who I don't know. That's on me, that's not on him. I don't know his life. I don't know what's going on, but still, that's what happened. So this whole kind of like Colorado thing, it was just too acoustic. I just didn't like it. So when this album came out, Barn, I was hesitant. I saw that it had Crazy Horse, and that made me happy. I've had a listen here and there to some of his most recent projects, over the last 20 years where I've been kind of ignoring him. The stuff with Lanois I liked, and other stuff with Crazy Horse I've kind of liked. But here's my chance to really listen. And this was the question. Did Neil Young really get worse? Or did I just all of a sudden change my taste with Neil Young? I think it's probably the second. I don't think he's gotten any worse. This album is great. And I can tell that just from 5 listens. What's funny is I listened to it and I immediately connected with it. It connected with me in a very deep, visceral way, in the way in which I love Crazy Horse. Ralph Molina is one of my favorite rock and roll drummers, despite the fact he is not, it's not like Ringo, where Ringo is sort of like, oh yeah, but he's actually really good. Like Ralph Molina is the only drummer where I feel like I am as good as him, but he just plays so well. And he and Billy Talbot, as this rhythm section, just know how to create what I call the Crazy Horse pocket, which is this little space where Neil solos and his voice can live, and no one else can make that noise for him. Not Booker T and the MGs, not the Stray Gators, not whatever all-star band that shows up at the Bridge concert. Nothing is better than Crazy Horse. By the way, their solo album, very underrated. Almost as good as a Neil Young album. So when I heard this album, it had that immediacy that I loved from Neil Young and Crazy Horse. It was only after I decided to review it, only after I'd listened to it and said, wow, this is some of the best Neil Young I've heard in a long time, that I learned it was all recorded live with minimal overdubs. Just the choruses, just the vocals the vocal choruses are overdubs. And that comes through. And that comes through especially strong in The Stamp, my example song. I'll give you the homework to watch the video of this song. So they recorded the entire recording of the video, of the album. Daryl Hannah recorded it and made a movie out of it. I haven't seen it yet. But the video I'm clicking to is the actual track that's on the album, Welcome Back. That's the actual recording of the actual song. It's live. And it is so good. It is... If I were to make a Neil Young mixtape and have 20 songs on it, this would be one of those songs. Just for fun, maybe I'll tell you my 3 favorite Neil Young songs at the end of this as well. It's got this growl to it. This is the kind of Neil Young song that I would listen to with my friends while we were like driving around. It's one of my favorite things about Neil Young songs, like his long songs where you just kind of get into it and just kind of sit with it. It builds over time. It starts with a whispering guitar and whispering vocals, and then it never quite rages like other parts of this album, but these guitar solos, just guitar solo after guitar solo, each one slightly different, each one spectacular, each one you can't wait for. And all along we have these mystical lyrics. Before your computer turns to you, remember the stars in the sky. And then that chorus comes in, stars in the sky. This really catchy, weird, funny thing. This natural versus technological divide. Stars in the sky only know we see them. They watch us grow. This mystical concept of the shade, and then the clouds save your skin. The clouds can save your skin in front of the sun, but shade is shade and it sucks you in no matter what you're thinking. This idea of welcome back, is this addiction? Is this depression? Like, what is this shade that he's talking about? It's not that clear. But much like much of his best lyric writing, and this is great lyric writing, it doesn't have to be clear. It sets this tone. He has all these solos, like this one where he uses octaves to create sort of a droning sound. And at one point, the guitar is way too loud. It's way too loud. It is too much tuna, too loud. It's so loud in the mix, and I love it. And the Crazy Horse pocket is right here. Just this space that they give. And each time Neil's solo comes in, there's this insane solo. Not the one with the octaves, the next one. Where he does this trick that he does sometimes when he's trying to really create some kind of whining, interesting sound, where he bends down the guitar. So instead of going, it's bending the string down to the natural note. All the way throughout, these lyrics, these mystical lyrics, well sung, thrown in, and then in between these great solos in this great pocket. And you can watch it all in that video. You can watch it all happening. You can see Neil Young and Crazy Horse. They're years and years and years and years and years together. It's not like we're watching Rush, or Radiohead, not like some master musicians who are totally in sync and know every note. They just know how to play and create that pocket. When he comes back and repeats a verse, the first verse at the end, it actually sounds like Bob Dylan, the phrasing. And I just want to say that Neil Young and Bob Dylan don't sound alike at all to me. They're always compared because they're whiny and they play harmonica. But it's when Neil Young does sound like Bob Dylan, I think it's worth pointing out because it's so rare. More great lyrics. The shade is just you blinking. The way he says the word welcome back has this world-weary feel to it. Welcome back, welcome back. It reminds me of the way he says the words motion pictures in the song Motion Pictures. Just this restrained sound, this line over and over again, the shade is just you blinking. It's one of these great Neil Young songs which is overly long and not overly long at all. It's not. It is exactly as long as it needs to be because it has that space and it has that feeling. If I had a script and I wasn't just reading notes, I would end it with something cheesy like, welcome back, indeed. But I don't have a script, I have notes. So I'm not going to say welcome back, indeed. I'm going to have a sip of my hot honey water. Good for the throat. The video for the song, I also really appreciate because, there's this whole kind of pastoral feel to Neil Young and his country bumpkin aesthetic that he draws on, this old hippie living on a gentleman farmer farm. But I really like that they recorded it all in this barn because it does have a cohesive feeling. It is a good location. It does feel that way. And there's a moment where he plays a solo and he walks into this shaft of light and the lighting is bad. It doesn't work. And I like it. It's part of what I like about Neil Young's stuff is often there are mistakes. One of my favorite moments, I think it's on Broken Arrow, Ralph Molina goes into the chorus a bar too soon. So the chorus is on the ride and the verse is on the hi-hat, and he goes in too soon and then he quickly switches back. I love those little mistakes, not because I think mistakes are good, but because it really is the authenticity of the Neil Young and Crazy Horse experience. So let's go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker. Starts off kind of weakly. I mean, the back half is really what makes this album sweet and amazing. Songs of the Seasons, I like, has an accordion and a harmonica. I guess Nils Lofgren is back with Crazy Horse after a 50-year break. And, lyrics about the country and the city, which is fine, but really it's the combination of the accordion and the harmonica that makes this special. Nature makes no mistakes. I do like that he refers to geese as honkers. That's funny. Bump out the goose. The second section of the song talks about these vinyl windows, so it's nice. It's a good example of Neil Young's sort of sequential lyric writing where he gets one idea and then he has to have 3 iterations of it. So it starts off with old windows and then new windows, but masked people walking everywhere. It's humanity in my sights. Neil Young is a great humanist. And then it's kind of a sweet love song as well. And that's one thing about Neil Young that maybe I need to fully forgive him for getting remarried again. Because this dude just needs to be in love. He just needs to be in love and have a partner. And I can relate. The third verse is weird. It's all about the Queen. And I don't know if this is some kind of Canadian like allegiance to the Queen of England or what it is. This is one of the mysterious notes on the album where please tell me in the notes, I haven't done any research, does this mean something else? So, this doesn't feel super Crazy Horse. If I had one problem with this song, it doesn't feel super Crazy Horse. Well, the other problem is the way it goes into the chorus. It sounds kind of underwritten. But it's kind of his fireplace mode. Kind of a fireplace mode as opposed to rockin' mode. But still, I really appreciate how bad the acoustic guitar sounds. Not bad, but just underproduced. Perfect. Heading West is a fake-out song. I almost didn't review this album because of the beginning of this song. Talking about the good old days when he was a kid and pulling around a wagon and going fishing at the creek or something. And I was like, God damn it, Neil. You are the last one. You are the, he's like the Bernie Sanders of rock and roll. You're the good boomer, Neil. Don't do this boomer mess where you talk about how things used to be good. And the first time I listened, I wasn't paying a lot of attention, and I noticed the chorus was about the good old days. But on the second listen, I picked something up very important. The good old days is the chorus. But before he gets there, he has a double long first verse where he talks about, in his teenage years, his parents getting a divorce and him going out west, looking for the good old days. That's the issue. He's looking for the good old days, not the days in the past. The song is set in the past, talking about trying to find good old days. Mommy in her little car driving us out. It's a post-divorce song. It's a sad song about the good old days. It's a sad song about his life changing, about getting his first guitar. Whatever these good old days are, they are ambiguous. We have an ambiguous feeling towards this entire adventure out west, heading away from his small town in North Ontario. Change Ain't Gonna is the next song. I'd say this is the low point of the album. Kind of a bad song. Nice kind of like doo-ka-doom, drum fill to start. I love Ralph Molina, but that's kind of a little ditty about freedom, kind of blurry blues. I got scared here because it seems to be about like the way the world is changing, and I can't tell if this is a song against electric cars or for electric cars, and a lot of it's about freedom. Anytime you have a baby boomer singer singing about like freedom, you're like, oh my God, don't go Van Morrison. I had to look up Neil Young's stance on COVID and masking, and thank God, even though he may be for a mass extinction event with GMOs, he is not for the pandemic. So he's very insistent on making sure that he canceled a concert because he didn't want to have a super spreader event. He's for masks. He's for vaccines. Whew. So whatever the song is, it's vague what it's about. And I think that's okay. I mean, Rockin' in the Free World was the way that his career was resurrected, and that song is also quite vague in its message. Speaking of vague in its message and having a title which made me confused and afraid that it may be too on the nose politically, the next song is Can American. I Am an American. Now here, what I like about this is we have a nice growling guitar. We're starting to get that Les Paul growling guitar in here. I cast my vote and now I got my man. Is this like a pro-Biden song, or is he in the perspective of a Trumpist? Because that's the other question. Like, was the previous song about change not going to come, it could have been from the position of a rioter in the Capitol, or it could be the position of Antifa. It's really not quite clear what side of the political divide he is speaking for or from, or is he speaking ironically from that perspective? I don't know. I think he is talking about himself because in the second verse he says, I am a Canarican. So talking about being an outsider from Canada and how America drew him in, and how his outsider perspective perhaps gives him a better view of the nature of what's happening in America. And then I get a little tired of the songwriting formula where the third one is I Am All Colors. But fortunately, we have a first guitar solo here, and then a second guitar solo, and then it fades out. Neil, you never, don't fade out. You've worked too hard and too long having awesome, great long songs to fade. What is going on here? You cannot fade out on a guitar solo. Please, it hurts. It hurts. That's the most painful part in the whole song, in the whole album. Next song, Shape of You, is a Ed Sheeran cover. No. Is just a fun blues song, simple, catchy chorus. I gotta be who I feel. It seems like it's a love song to the mermaid. You know, just loving Daryl Hannah. You changed my life for the better, wore my love like a sweater. This is sort of one of these filler songs which Neil Young has on his albums, which this is where you need time. Because Neil Young's filler songs can often end up being your favorite songs, you just don't know. In particular, at the end, the falsetto that he has, like the looseness and the charm of this whole project comes through in the way that he sings these lines in the falsetto. More great harmonica work all the way through. I think it must be a litmus test of how do I feel about Neil Young by how do I feel about his harmonica when I'm in a Neil Young mode. And every couple years I go in a Neil Young mode where like I just listen to nothing but Neil Young for like a couple months and then I back off. When I'm in that mode, all of his harmonica is great. When I'm not in that mode, every harmonica note is terrible. Next song, They Might Be Lost, a slow acoustic song. Nice drums, nice piano layers in here. Maybe the best harmonica work on the album. This is an interesting song. You know, he sings a lot about weed. You know, Mellow My Mind is one of my favorite songs, despite its topics being sort of a boring weed song. Roll Another Number, another one of my favorite songs of his. Hell, the whole Homegrown album, right? Which I reviewed recently. And, you know, the truck should have come back. It's past 4:20. The smoke that I burn keeps taking me back to the old days. But what I like about this is it's ambiguous. Like this truck, which I think represents people who are bringing drugs to Neil, talks about smoke, burning the smoke, but saying the jury is out on the old days. So maybe the old days, maybe the old hippie dream, the old way of being, he's questioning now. The judgment is soon coming down. I can't remember what it was that I knew. I think that's a great line. I think that's a wonderful line. I think for the boomers, the old hippies who've partially fried out their brain on drugs, I can't remember what it was that I once knew. The jury is out on the old days is amazingly insightful and is blessedly free of the kind of self-serving, we knew what we were doing and we changed the world that you hear way too much. I don't know what it means. I don't know what the song means. Like, this is like the third or fourth song on the album where I don't know what it means, and I think that's beautiful. Lets it ride a little bit, gets into a little bit of that Crazy Horse pocket for the first time on the album here, towards the end here, the instrumental part. Then we get to The Human Race. 2 chords blaring, awesome. Whiny, sounding the unprepared voice, talking about the selfishness of his generation, of my generation, an odd choir, children of the fire and the floods. This song is very clear what it's about. It's environmentalism. It's his armchair environmentalism. It lacks subtlety, but I don't mind it. I don't mind it because the way he just puts everything as today's people. He's not saying anyone in particular. He's not soloing out Monsanto. He's not talking about... He's just saying today's people, and you can't really be mad at a song with this many great guitar solos. Neil Young could sing a song called Professor Sky Smells Like Old Broccoli, and if it had these kinds of guitar solos, I would listen to it all the time. This is where I wish I had a big enough fan base where someone could record a faux Neil Young song called Professor Sky Smells Like Old Broccoli. Underrated bad smell, by the way. You know, like, so we have like he gets the ZZ Top screech. That's where when you play a guitar with a pick and then you let it hit your thumb, it goes, wah, wah. You know, like, think about the ZZ Top sound. Wah, wah. I don't mean ZZ Top bad drum machine. I mean like the guitar line. And just so many guitars, less harmonica. It seems like, you know, there's... How Neil Young treats the space in his songs is either with harmonica or with guitars. And I love the guitars, and I usually like and tolerate the harmonica. You know, all about this human race. It's a joke about the human race. It's about this at the starting gun. And just more great solos and flames and waves. And today's people have left behind. And it all works because there's so many great guitar solos just flying around everywhere that we can forgive the on-the-nose nature of the music. Tumbling Through the Years, another very charming track. This might end up being my favorite track on the album. You know, I'm going to buy this album on vinyl. My Patreons are giving me money. I appreciate it. I'm going to use it to buy the new Neil Young. Just great acoustic guitar and plucky piano. I love his piano approach on this song. I read somewhere that he's using the same guitar he used on After the Gold... the same piano he used on After the Gold Rush. Okay. But I really love it. I really love the way the piano interacts with the acoustic guitar on this song. Kind of an old man song, but that's okay. Like, I don't mind any song about being old or, you know, sort of natural songs about life. if it's not just justifying what you've done. Like the thing that bothers me most in music is people saying, I don't need to change. That's the most boring thing. That's the reason I don't like modern country, because modern country is primarily about not needing to change. Everything I do is great, and that's what it is. There's this song, it's a love song, but it's complicated, this life, you know, like talking about the complications of life, the love that he has. The bass lines by Talbot here are kind of like Motown. Reminds me of like Come and Get Your Love or something, kind of like 70s soul. That's quite nice. They fade out again. God damn it, Neil. Who's letting you fade out your songs? Then we get to the stamp, Welcome Back. We see how there's just between the human race tumbling through the years, Welcome Back, just this whole stretch is so good. Then the final song is Don't Forget Love. I think if you had an automatic Neil Young lyric generator, you would have the song Don't Forget Love, just because he loves singing songs about love. But hey, people stopped singing about love in like 1970. But even when Neil Young was getting all futuristic and computery or throwbacky and 50s and whatever weirdness he was going through, he's always talked about love. It's always the central subject of his music, is the power of love. So why not? Don't forget love. Frowning down. When you're feeling frown and you're feeling down, don't forget about love. But I love the piano and the way the guitar goes together. Just playing the hi-hats. Melina's just playing the hi-hats for the most part. The singing is very high and very sweet. At a certain point, it picks up a bit on the drums, and he plays what I call the Purple Haze drum beat. Eventually, at the ending, like it just kind of, there's this moment where these three little piano notes that just play, and it's just the perfect production note. And it's the kind of thing that when I revisit this album over the years, those three little piano notes, every time I hear them, I'm gonna go, oh, those three little piano notes. And then at the end, you know, Don't Forget Love, they just keep singing all together. You get the sense they're all together and happy to be with each other. So, you want my top 10 favorite Neil Young songs? Albums? Let's do it. Number 10, Greendale. Hated this when it came out. My friend went and got an autograph. Dave got an autograph from Neil Young. Still didn't like it. A year later, I picked it up, listened to it again. It's his only real concept album. It's very strong. I think it belongs along with Bowie's Outside as the great story albums made by 70s rock gods. Number 9, Landing on Water. Someday I'm going to do an entire video about Landing on Water. It is his most hated, most bargain bin album, but every track on here is great. The production is weird. It's 80s soft rock production, but his songwriting comes through. And when you really listen to these, Weight of the World and Violent Side and Bad News Beat and People on the Street and Hard Luck Stories, and it's just an amazingly great album. This, I think, is the greatest proof of his genius. Because if you love Neil Young, it's hard to listen to this album the first couple times. But then when you really love Neil Young, you really love this album. Zuma, I'm going to put at number 7. Primarily because of Cortez the Killer and Don't Cry No Tears. Stupid Girl is a bad enough track. But this really has some of the best pocket work by Neil Young and Crazy Horse. Spoiler, I'm not going to include Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere on this list. It's just too spotty of an album. But this is why I included Zuma, because I needed some of that amazing pocket work that they're able to do. Number 6 is Harvest. I almost didn't put this on here because I want to be Mr. Contrarian, but the song Out on the Weekend makes me cry every time I listen to it. Out on the Weekend has been the way that I have felt on the weekend, and Boy with a Thorn in His Side by the Smiths are the most accurate depictions of my longing for love in life. And now that I'm happily married, I don't have to feel that anymore. But see the lonely boy out on the weekend trying to make it pay, can't relate to joy, he tries to speak and can't find the words to say. That's how I felt. So, Old Man's fine and all that, right? All that's fine. So the contrarian in me wanted to put Comes a Time, his late 70s album, which I listened to more. But just purely based on the strength of Out on the Weekend, that has to go there. Number 5, the aforementioned Trans. I love this album. I love what it represents. I had to find it. It took a long time to discover. I love that he worked with Devo. I own the album the movie Human Highway on VHS. And I really like the changes, and I love his vocoder work. I think it's underrated, and I think it's special. What are we on here? 5? Broken Arrow. It took me a long time to like it, but it's Neil Young, Crazy Horse in the 90s in their simplest, most straightforward mode. This reminds me a lot of this album Barn in its straightforwardness. 4, I don't even have the cover to this because this was my first Neil Young album after the Gold Rush. Again, I want to be a contrarian, but this was the album that got me into Neil Young, very much so. And it was the guitar solo in Southern Man. Now, I prefer the guitar solo to Down by the River. That's my favorite Neil Young guitar solo. But the guitar solo in Southern Man was the announcing of that single note. Why do I put Neil Young as number 2 on my list of greatest guitarists of all time? It's because of moments like Southern Man. And also just so many great songs on here. Only Love Can Break Your Heart, After the Gold Rush, which my son learned how to play on French horn once. Number 3, On the Beach. I still apologize to my sister-in-law, Deborah. I lost her copy of On the Beach back in the 90s before the reissue was there. But basically every song on here is great. In particular, the back half here, On the Beach, Motion Pictures, Ambulance Blues. The album's better known for the Turnstiles, but as you'll see, my favorite stuff from Neil Young is that dark, deep, spacey mode. My second favorite Neil Young album is Sleeps with Angels. It's a 90s album, but this was my album. This was the album that I listened to the most on tape in my car, my old Ford Windstar, and this album was the response to grunge, which he created, but is actually probably the best, Nevermind is a better album, but it's probably the second best grunge album made. I certainly think this is better than any Pearl Jam album. They'd probably agree. It has so much variance, going from My Heart into a song like Change Your Mind and like the title track Sleeps with Angels. It is just an amazing, amazing album. It took me a long time to get into, but eventually I loved it. And if you're watching the channel, you should know my number 1 favorite album is Tonight's the Night. Maybe my favorite album of all time. Depends on what kind of mood I'm in, If I have to choose between this and Pet Sounds, I think they're equal albums in terms of their production. Even though this is intentionally sloppy, intentionally crazy, no other album gets me in this kind of mood. No other album gets me in this kind of feeling. I love the songwriting. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I understand this album is partly the result of depression and drinking and all that, but I don't care. It's the artistry that interests me. And every single song on this album is amazing and makes me happy and is, to me, a testament to his greatness. So those are my top 10 favorite Neil Young albums. Top 3 favorite Neil Young songs. Number 3, Change Your Mind. I love the 17-minute version. I love the chorus. It's some of the best pocket work that they have ever done. Number 2, Down by the River. I didn't include Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, but Down by the River is probably the song I've listened to most. And whenever I need to explain to people what is Neil Young, that's the song I play. My number 1 favorite song by Neil Young is Transformer Man. Now, some of you are going to be pissed because a lot of people don't like that song. That, to me, is the essence of Neil Young's beauty. That he was able to completely change what he was doing, make this song, and I mean the original version, not the unplugged, make this song with totally different instrumentation, totally wild sound, complete break, angering all the hippies. But at the basis of it is this beautiful song where he's trying to connect to his sons who have trouble communicating to him. It's his strength as a father, it's his strength as a husband, it's his strength as a human being, and his strength as an artist to create such a moving song that is so unsettling and so far from Down by the River that you can hardly believe that the same man would then go on to make Change Your Mind. We just need to appreciate, look at this. Sometimes I get goosebumps. I got goosebumps talking about Transformer Man. And also, when I was younger, in high school, it was my dream to one day meet Neil Young. And I actually was very close once. A friend of the family lived next door to Neil Young. And I could have gone over and bothered him, but I didn't. But I used to have literal dreams. I had a dream once, and then it became a fantasy, where I would one day go to a signing. I guess he's done signings once, but I've never been to one. He would one day go to signings, and I would wear this hat, this Conrail hat. It's a defunct railway line in New England. I would wear this hat, and first of all, in my fantasy, he would see the hat and think it was very, very cool. And he would talk to me about the Conrail line because he loves model trains and he loves railroads. So I had this whole dream. And then I would tell him, I want to thank you. I had it all set. You know how you are with your celebrities? Where you know what you would say to them? You know? You know it. You've thought about this. What would you say? What would you say? And I knew if I ever met Neil Young, I would say, thank you for Transformer Man. That was my line. What are your favorite Neil Young albums? What are your Neil Young favorite songs? What are your top 10, your top 3? I'm interested. These are my Patreons. So, I talked about how I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Professor Sky. And if you go there, there's lots of videos that are very cool that I make behind the scenes, little stuff that other people don't see. But I take all your money and I use it just to buy music, just to support artists like Neil Young. So thank you to all these people, some new people over there. I wrote your names kind of quickly, Jowser, Brandon Velasquez, and Lucas Fenton. I apologize for that, but I said your names, so that's good. Oh yeah, and then this, my first ever double LP. He's not upside down. So yes, please tell me, what are your favorite Neil Young albums? What's your top 10? Have you listened to Barn, and do you think it's amazing? Because I really think it is. Someday, it might make it onto that list. And that's the beauty of Neil Young. You never know if his next album will be one of your favorite albums by Neil Young. And very few other artists have that ability 55 years into their career. Okay, till next time, here's the camera.